So welcome to another episode of the Pepe Soup Talk Show, where we bring to the table movers and shakers in the African diaspora. We have the pleasure of speaking today with Daina Richie-Troy. She's a mother of two. She has a background in media and higher education. She currently serves as the director of Penn Spectrum programs and shared interest groups at the University of Pennsylvania in the Alumni Relations Department. Before that, she worked with Maku. She was a staff member there. Maku is a Black Cultural Center at Penn. She's also a lecturer. She co-teaches a history course called "The History of History of the Descent of African People," also at Penn. And prior to going into higher education, she worked in the music industry, going back and forth between New York and LA. Not to mention, she is also a very proud Philly native. And so we're excited to hear about her journey and go into her background and all that she's doing in higher education now. And so welcome to Pepe Soup Talk, Daina Richie-Troy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's good to see you both.
It's good to see you too. It's good to see you too.
Yeah. So Daina, again, Aki and I was just talking about just having you on the talk show. It just feel like it's like seeing you back on campus. So it's always great when we just having an interview with someone that have so much impact on us personally. So this is definitely like a different interview. So we very honored to have you. We know like you have plethora of like wisdom and experience, but our audience is basically like, Black and brown folks who are in the space of navigating this life and the challenges it present. And you always been in a position that your work always involved making an impact on young people and the next generations and building the next generation. And it's great to see someone like you continue to do that. So we just wanted to hear a little bit about your experience in that.
I mean,
go ahead.
I mean, if we can start with beginning of your professional career, like we know your backgrounds in media and in music. Maybe we could start there.
Okay. Well, it's wonderful to see you too. I'm glad you chose to stay in Philly. That's always something that's like remarkable and positive. Glad you chose us. So I'm an alum like you. So, I came through Penn. I was in Morton. I studied marketing and management, but I didn't see a path for me in the corporate spaces. I was a little eccentric. I was really into the arts. And I did not secure that coveted first job that most people seem to have when they're graduating. I was still exploring. And so the summer, after my senior year, I did some theater work in Philadelphia. And then I came upon some opportunities in New York City. And I became an intern up in New York by chance, working with a manager who was connected to some executives at Bad Boy Entertainment, Bad Boy Records. And so that year was 1998. And I ended up coming into Bad Boy 1 year after Biggie passed away.
Wow.
The year that Puffy was launching Sean John Clothing Company, and the year that Puffy was sort of embarking upon a solo career. So it was a very complicated time for hip hop, coming after a couple of just really devastating deaths, a sort of a reckoning in the industry and how we wanted to engage one another. And also, it doesn't seem like anything now, but like the turn of the century was like upon us. Like we were waiting for the year 2000 to come upon us. So it was this really great year for hip hop. And I came on as an intern and was eventually hired to work at Bad Boy. I'm of the era that referred to Diddy as Puffy. Yeah. So I'm gonna date myself and say that we called him Puff. And I started working with an executive by the name of Ron Gilliard in marketing and A&R. And I stayed on Ron's team for 2 more companies. I followed him to J Records, which we were the original staff of J Records. He was the head of urban music. Senior vice president, I think, of urban music was the actual title. And so there was Alicia Keys and Luther Vandross and just a lot of really remarkable people, Mario. And that was under the tutelage of Clive Davis. And so that was a very corporate, very entrepreneurial, educational moment for me. And then went on to Interscope. And so that was my time in the West Coast, and had the pleasure of working with Mary J. Blige, working on a soundtrack while I was out there. And I got out there and didn't feel very LA. I'm a Philly girl, it's too far from the family. Just, I wasn't ready. It wasn't ready. And so I came back to the East Coast and ended up working at G Unit. As sort of one of my final things in the music industry. And at G Unit, I worked on touring and marketing and sort of getting G Unit out. So I worked on like a G Unit tour, but was really behind the scenes there, not so much in marketing, far more in administration, and just trying to get G Unit as a label, established and, get all their business practices in order. So working with Sean Money, he definitely looked out and made sure I had another opportunity on the East Coast. And then I left that and sort of did just other media work. Didn't feel like I wanted to be in music anymore. Felt like I wanted to go someplace else. And I was called back home. I wanted to be back in Philadelphia. So when I came back to Philadelphia, I ended up working at Maku and, coming back to Penn, seeing what was up there. But my time in the music industry was really, I like to call it grad school for me. Mm-hmm. I really learned a lot on the job. Learned a lot on the job about budgeting, relationship management, and that's aside from time management. So time management to me as an adult is really, really funny concept, especially for first jobs, because you're just working all the time. And the way you manage your time is to get back to your job, like in the morning. That was my time management. I came in every day. But all of the things that I learned in that space, I think really helped me when I came back to higher ed. And I've said this before, I went from developing artists to developing students. And I will say that I found the experience of developing students to be something more fulfilling for me. I really enjoyed student engagement. So that's my quick story at Maku. You all know, one of the things that I really charged myself with was making sure students enjoyed their time in college. It's a time of study, but I also think it's a wonderful time for personal development and exploration. And that is similar to what we hope for an artist experience, when they're making an album and they're preparing, to go out into the world with their product. Kind of want students to have that same experience. Like, what do you have to share and what do you have to offer the world? And so Maku was fun for me, like in that way.
Thank you for sharing that part of your story. I gotta ask, did you see the Super Bowl halftime show?
The Super Bowl halftime show was remarkable for me. It's hard to explain to people who have grown up with hip hop all around them. Yeah. How much of a sea change that we have gone through, that the Super Bowl halftime show was hip hop. Like, I watched hip hop become accepted by the mainstream over the course of my life. Yeah. Policemen used to knock on your car windows and tell you to turn your music off. Mm. People would walk up into your step and tell you it was inappropriate. People would roll their eyes while you were listening to hip hop. And to see it on the Super Bowl stage and to see such a clean performance. Yeah. I had a moment. I was one of those prideful generation Gen Xers that was in my bag, really enjoying my time, really enjoyed it.
That was powerful. It was powerful. I know that graduating and going down the track that you did, which isn't the typical, like, conventional, like, pre-professional path, especially, I don't know how it was at Penn at that time, but I know that when we were at Penn, that was a path that a lot of people took. Mm-hmm. What advice do you have for students? And I'm sure you have these conversations, but for students who are graduating or are just in their in their pen experience, but, may not want to, take that like, more conventional track that a lot of Penn students take. Like, what advice do you have for that? As far as like, I'm sure it was a lot of navigating to, after you graduated.
Well, one thing I would say is don't panic. I think when we don't follow other people's roadmaps, we have this sense of uncertainty that can veer into panic. I had not seen someone walk the path that I wanted to walk. And so I spent a lot of time terrified, like literally terrified. But the other side of it that I like to acknowledge is I was terrified because I was keenly aware of my reality. I'm not wealthy. I wasn't going to graduate and go home into wealth. My intention was to add to my family's wealth. And so when I graduated without a job, I felt like I wasn't, on the track to add to wealth, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying don't be grounded in your reality. Be aware of what you wanted from the situation and what you wanted to bring to it. But also give yourself some grace that if you don't have a job that month coming out of college, you're not a failure. There's time for exploration. And there's time for careers that you haven't seen before. And one of the things that I've seen over the past, I want to say 10 years, is this proliferation of industries that simply did not exist 12, 15 years ago. Like they weren't there. Yeah. So having an open mind, even this podcast that's happening right now, right? This is a relatively new phenomenon. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Embrace that possibility, embrace that creativity, and know that there are new technologies and new spaces for you to go into. And also know that there's no shame. I feel like for a lot of people throughout the African diaspora, we are not taught we're taught to get on the same level. Yeah. We're not taught to acknowledge the levels that other people are on. Mm-hmm. Coming into it. And I think if we give each other grace and say, okay, this is what I'm bringing to the table, this is my environment, this is what I'm going into this with, we can look at each other and go, okay, well, this is what you bring. Let's take what you bring and let's move something with it. And I think being at Penn and seeing possibility was really remarkable for me. But at the same time, it highlighted what I didn't have sort of in my toolbox. Yeah. And it made me wonder, like, am I supposed to be, in the ranks here? I would say to someone, yes, you're supposed to be in the ranks. You were asked to come be in the ranks. You were asked to come and build yourself up. So I would say to someone who was like going out to the world, like, see what you have to bring, see what you have to offer, and give it freely, give it freely. I believe that exchange of ideas and in creative space, it does a lot for you. It does a lot for you. And those key years right out of college, your energy level at that stage, it will never be like that ever again. I know you all know what I'm talking about because you're coming past the hump. So it's time to chill. It's time to chill. You've given your first go ahead. You've done your sprint. Yeah. Give yourself that grace coming out to look at your gifts and figure out where you want to place them.
Yeah. Right. And Daina, thank you so much for being vulnerable with us and for sharing your experience. It really resonated with both of us. Just to build onto Aki's questions, you're someone who's been exposed to different space, different career path, and you were able to finally come down to what you're passionate about, which is making an impact on the youth and the next generation. Given that said, you also someone, like you said, you're talking about having the tools in life to be successful. Regardless of your career path, whether you're in a space where it's like, you're in the Ivy League space, or you're someone who is also in that space, or you're someone who's in the career path, based on your experience, like, what are few major life tools that anyone should have in their box to be successful in any space? And I think you mentioned one of them would be time management, but
Time management.
I'll definitely want to make sure like I let users respond.
Definitely time management. I would say a willingness to contribute. I think people who consider labor to be obligatory don't enjoy life. There has to be some labor you enjoy doing. Now, it's okay to not enjoy all types of labor, but there has to be some labor that you enjoy. And for me, that's also a faith-based belief that there is value in labor, you know, and part of your ability to labor is your gift as a person. There has to be something that you bring to the table. So just the willingness to offer of yourself is the first step. If you come out and you're like, I hate working, you haven't identified your gift. There's something you do that offers something to others. You got to find it. So the willingness to find that, I think, is the first thing. The second thing is integrity, I have to say. And when I say integrity, I mean knowing where you stand with something and being willing to deliver that. It prevents so many problems. It allows people to be straight with one another, and it allows you to bring your best self to the table. If I tell you I'm a good public speaker and you hand me a mic and I'm like, listen, you could have told me you don't like to speak. I would have found something else for you to do. So come to me in integrity, and I feel like you'll do a better job. You know, come to me with what you know is there. Don't present yourself as something that you're not. And lastly, I think you have to come with a real sense of honesty around your boundaries. And I say that because people can get into situations where they're, you know, overpromising and doing the most, and someone will find you to be unreliable, whereas you just didn't set the right boundary. You knew you were going to work until 8 o'clock. You knew you weren't working until 9. Someone is looking for you from 8 to 9, and it negates the time that you work from, you know, from whatever to 8. Because we're concentrating on what you didn't do, right? So set boundaries and be really, really clear about those things, you know, that you do and that you're willing to do and that you're promising and you're laying on the line. And the other thing I think is, and this is so hard, and I will say I was challenged by this, an open heart. You know, people talk about imposter syndrome and things like that. Don't tell yourself no before anybody else. Like, you can do so much in the world if you open your heart and go, you know, I think I can do that. You're the first person who has to tell yourself yes. Let other people tell you no. Let other people go, yeah, that's not your thing. I think I'm gonna redirect you. Like, when you want to do something, go ahead and do it. Like, I'm assuming to do this podcast, you two had to talk to one another and go, we have really interesting conversations. We should let other people see our conversations. Yeah. That's an opening of your heart, right? And that's expansive. And so I think anything that's expansive, and it all starts in here, right? We can learn Excel, we can learn Word. You know, when people ask me what my skill sets are, I tell them I can read and I can count. I can read and I can count. What do you want me to read and what do you want me to count? Like, everything builds from there. Yeah. Everything else is, where are you aiming me? Right? So I think the openness of the heart is what I see leading to entrepreneurship. I see people trying things, discovering it's not their thing, moving on to something else. That openness, it does so much for us as a community and just, you know, as people. And again, I will be honest, you know, once you get involved with certain things and you settle, it's hard to open your heart again. You know, when you partner and you settle down or you purchase a home or you have children, you have other responsibilities, you have opened your heart to those responsibilities, right? They have taken up space. So I think the time to open your heart is, you know, when you have an opportunity and a lot of things in your plate and you can see, you know, how you feel about things. Like, you know what? I'm not the type of person that's settled down, but I think I want to run a storefront. Or, you know, I don't like people. I'm going to work at this job as an associate for 2 years and not see people during waking hours. But afterwards, I'm going to have enough capital to do the things that I want. I think if you open your heart and tell yourself yes to your visions, you find out how it is that you can grow. And the other thing, the final thing I want to say, the fifth one, is honest assessment. Do not lie to yourself about where you are. Be clear enough to say, this is not it.
Yeah.
And don't waste time for status, for investment in other people's vision for you, and doing something that's not effective. And part of honest assessment is timeliness. You have to do a timely assessment of things that you're involved in and make sure you're adding value. The value's being added to you. And I think if you do that timely assessment of whether or not you're truly invested in all the, the four things that I mentioned before, you assess whether or not all those things are being met. Like, do I feel good? Is this meeting what I want? Am I really following my heart? Am I doing what I'm supposed to do? Am I fulfilling what I want for me? You'll fall into a profession that suits you. It's the best use of your time. And then you can build upon that and do all those other things that you want to build around your life.
And that's a lot of words of wisdom.
Right, absolutely.
That's a lot of words of wisdom.
I think we should just give our viewers a little moment here to soak up all the novels, right?
Yeah.
Because it just made me feel like if anybody's about to embark on anything, I just want you to listen to those like the word of wisdom of Daina before you jump into doing anything.
It's okay to get your pen and paper out right now. It's probably the time to do so. Yeah.
That was really powerful. Thank you for sharing this with us.
Thank you.
When you made that transition from music industry to a student life and higher education, what was that transition like? Because in retrospect, and maybe as you're going along that journey, you saw that a lot of the skills that you developed and experiences you had were very transferable. But what inspired you into a direction of impacting students when you came back to Penn?
Well, it wasn't an intentional, like, I'm going into higher education. Yeah. I came back to Philadelphia after being really exhausted by the music industry. I was out 6 out of the 7 days a week. I felt like where I was going professionally was reasonable, but I wasn't a representative of that culture. I enjoyed it. Yeah. I had fun promoting it, but I didn't want to swim in that water every day. And I respect all of my colleagues that remain in it and all the colleagues that I work with there who do amazing work. I knew I wasn't home, if that makes sense. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to take a time out for this, and I'm going to go find something a little bit more suitable to me in my day-to-day. And when I came back to Penn, I went to seek out my mentor, Dr. Carlene Burrell-McCrae. And when I came to visit her, she happened to have had an opportunity, a temporary opportunity. And she said, if you want to get, your footing in Philadelphia, come work with me for a little bit. I fell into the job by taking a temporary position. I was an interim office coordinator, I think, was my title. And I was an interim program coordinator. And I started working with Emoja. And I started working with Black Men United and helping them promote their groups. And I ended up getting hired. Like, I applied for the full-time position of associate director. As associate director, I started to work with what is now called the Robeson Cooper program. It was called the Paul Robeson program. And that was about social impact and your Penn experience matching up. And that really resonated with me. That spoke to me. And then I want to say members of the class of 2014 wanted to pick up on Sister Sister as a meeting group. So I got to work with that development. And then working with all the student groups, who wanted to come in and build things up. So after 2 or 3 years, I was able to reflect and go, oh, I'm doing project management. This is like running an artist. Yeah. I got this. This isn't a problem. Got a budget. We have a calendar. This is what we're doing. These are our events. This is how we're doing it. And then just one-on-one consultations, with students and figuring out career paths and study paths and majors and major changes and things like that. So a lot of what I did in music, was creative and, administrative. This is our plan. This is how we're going to do it. But it was also crisis control. Like, this isn't working, or this needs to be remedied. And I was remarkably good at crisis control. You can't be trained in crisis control. You just go through crises. And during the time that I was in the music industry, I ended up working really well with my staff because I seemed to be adept at that. So the crises that came up on the student side, I got it, no problem. And Penn as an institution is really wonderful with professional development. And so in the ways that I sort of needed that adjustment from, general production and music into the student engagement space, I was able to get training. And so I was able to make that shift and make that turn. Now, internally, when you talk about being vulnerable, I felt like a failure.
Mm-hmm.
I left the music industry.
Yeah.
And I left a successful music industry. I wasn't working with some itty bitty label in a corner. I worked with the best labels one could work with. I worked with top artists. When I left G-Unit, they were doing fantastic. Yeah. But I knew I couldn't stay in that space, and that space wasn't for me. Mm-hmm. And I wanted more of that space, and they couldn't give it to me. So we had to part ways. Mm-hmm. We had to part ways. But I felt fine once I took the permanent position at Maku. I felt like I had made the best decision. Yeah. But going from an industry which looks like, really shiny on the outside, it was the culture builder, right? You're working to develop culture, and you're part of the group of people who are building culture. So, when you look at videos and you're just like, who are these people at these parties? Like, this is me. I'm at the parties. Yeah. I'm going to the parties. I'm the people. I'm the person at the back. I'm the person at the bar. This is the music we're sending out. And in as much as I thought it was a wonderful opportunity and space, it wasn't sustaining for me as a professional. Mm. And I think you all have seen me in a professional capacity as an educator, and you could see that I'm home. Yeah. I'm home now. This is where I belong. But I will say at first, it did feel like a missed opportunity. Mm. And it took some reframing. But if someone said, hey, I have a job for you back, over here, I would decline. Right. This is kind of where I live. And I feel great here. And I also felt great being able to identify people who I thought would work well in media and entertainment, and direct them into that space. That was just a great opportunity for me. And I still mentor people who go into media and entertainment. But making that transition felt very uncomfortable and awkward at first. And then when I was able to interact with maybe 2 classes and, get some time under my belt, I felt very good about the transition and very good about what I was able to bring back to the university.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, Daina, again, it's just been, I'm learning so much about you right now that I'm like, I wish I had more conversation with you when I was on campus. So this is great, honestly. So another question that I have, Daina, is it seemed like you were navigating a space where a lot of people of color was just not used to be in this space, whether that is in a space like Ivy Leagues, like Penn, or place of high educations. So why do you think that you were project managing, but I think it's go deeper than that. You were also creating a space for people of color, people to come in a place where they feel like their home
belong.
and they belong, this sense of safety. Can you talk to us a little bit about why is it important for people of color, student of color, to have a space, to have a seat at the table?
Well, one of the things that I will say to you, especially as students who have probably a closer connection to global citizenry, is there is a mythology around this table, right? And there's a mythology of ownership around this table. And we're constantly centering Americans, and we're centering white supremacist Americans, and we're not stepping back and framing it as global commerce, right? When I worked in the music industry, the thing that I witnessed most directly that affected me and changed my worldview was the willingness of global commerce to partake in hip hop. We're talking about Black Americans who are reviled in the United States and reviled the world over, right? But they have this product. Some of it's tangible, some of it's intangible. And this product is hip hop and it's hip hop culture. And who wants to engage with them? The entire world.
Yeah.
Everyone. And so the mythology around this table sort of dissipated for me. It was like, there is no table. There's something of worth to be traded, and we're going to trade it. And from the 90s, the 80s and the 90s, I think were a time where people were really trying to understand what Blackness meant. In the 90s, our media was exposing us to the breadth of Blackness. So we're coming up on like Malcolm X and Spike Lee releasing Malcolm X. That was a time of exposure for people. Not everyone had read the autobiography of Malcolm X. Not everyone understood him. But when those things started to meet like pop culture, it's like, oh, wow, we're a people, right? So much of our concepts around the world came from movies. And you're watching things on movies, and I came up in the age where we had leather Africa pendants.
Yeah.
No one knew anyone who was actually from the continent. Not at all. I happened to. I had people in my family who had married into an Ethiopian family. And so for me, it was like, okay, they're from this country.
Yeah.
The development of the 90s into now, technology, travel, exchange, that's not just white and Black people, that's Black people within the diaspora.
Yeah.
And when I got into the music industry and I saw how many people globally wanted a part of this hip hop movement,
Yeah.
every culture, right? Because it was a art form that allowed for high volume vocal expression.
Mm-hmm.
It allowed for expression of apparel. It allowed for expression of how you conducted yourself. It allowed for expression in cosmetics and hair. You're bringing all yourself to the table. And so now you're not a myth or a story. It's not Africa. Hey, guess what, guys? They have countries in Africa and they have different dialects. Hey, oh, we can get on a plane and go to Africa? For real? So the concept that Africa wasn't some mythological land from whence all the slaves came to the United States and we can no longer exchange or be around each other, boom, gone. So now we're talking. But we're also talking to Chinese kids. And we're also talking to Indonesians. And we're also talking to Japanese kids. And we are all throughout Europe, right? Hip hop is everywhere. And yo, did you know that there are Black people in Europe? What? What? The diaspora was completely separate. We weren't talking. We weren't exchanging with each other. We didn't know one another. And hip hop really, I think, allowed a lot of that to change. And I went to undergrad with Pan-African nationals.
Yeah.
But they did not center their Pan-African nationalism because they were told to assimilate for success. And they were 1 and 2 in number as opposed to a group of 5. Whereas when I came back to Penn, probably like in my 4th year of working, I have like a Kenyan contingent, 2 parts of Kenya arguing with each other. It's like, what? Like, what are you talking about right now? Right. So, and you know what I'm talking about, right? So the idea that people of color are global is something that I was able to come back to and see in higher education that existed before, but I didn't see it. And now it's being promoted because it's commercially intriguing. It's commercially intriguing, right? At the same time, intraculturally, we don't have discussions around our different cultures that we could. And I like to foster those discussions. I want people to be aware, hey, this country has a different history than this country. African independence throughout a lot of the countries in Africa in the 40s and 50s preceded the civil rights movement in the United States. And then that civil rights movement, you know, reverberated throughout the globe. But a lot of that came through our Ivy Leagues. Because different students, different African nationals are educated in the United States. They see how things are operated and how things are done. They go back to their countries and they go, hey, how about we not accept this government? How about we run our own? And Penn has a place in that as well. So when students are coming from all over the globe and United States, you know, neighborhood to neighborhood in Philly is different. Think about state to state, city to city. You have different upbringings and different geographical upbringings. You have a different worldview. And so when I talk about working with like people of color and working with the diaspora, I want everyone to bring their lived experience to the table so that we can exchange information, exchange ideas, and we can talk about quality of life. Are you getting the most out of this education experience? Do you have a professional pipeline? Do you feel like you have a professional network? And I appreciate that there's an intimacy that comes from sharing sort of like your identity, no matter what that is, and saying, hey, you know, this is how I enter the space. This is how I function with my elders. This is our relationship around food. This is how we share resources and money. This is how we share housing. This is how we move forward. I believe, and what I've loved about Black Twitter is seeing people toss back and forth. No, it's not like that. No, it is like that. No, it's not like that. Finding out, you know, different things about one another. And that's something that I don't think changes without a high level of engagement. And that's technology. You know, if we didn't have the technology we have, then I don't think we would experience what we experience in terms of this camaraderie we have or this appreciation, you know, that we have. I have a friend who I work with when I was in the music industry, who is a top executive right now. And he is, I'm not sure if he's second generation, possibly first generation African-American, Pan-African American. And he's just doing wonderfully, right? And he's able to promote this new wave of music, Afrobeats, and just all Afrobeats and its derivative. Like he's able to do like everything, but he's, you know, an American educated, went to college here, whatever, happens to be African. Right place, right time, able to be expansive with the culture, right? Expansive with the culture. And I've been so amazed to see other people able to jump in and hop in on that. But the respect comes from, I hate to say it, the capital. It comes from the fact that people are making money off of this industry. So the respect didn't come from respect of culture. The respect has come from the respect of money. That is a reality that I grapple with, and I struggle with.
Yeah.
But I'm real enough to observe,
Yeah.
right, and to say that this is where it comes from. But the world over, when we're talking about what people of color deal with, it's access to capital and maintenance of capital. Access to infrastructure, maintenance of infrastructure. And the reason why I concentrate and like to work with people of color, sort of just like in my personal work, is there are disparities.
Yeah.
There are disparities. And if I can get to you and make sure your disparity is what you receive and not a disparity in what you pursue, I feel like I've done my job. I want you to go for everything. I want you to be completely expansive, and your imagination should just like reach all levels.
Yeah.
Because if you're not being expansive, we don't know what's not happening. If you went for what we instructed you to go to, is like, I think I want this.
Yeah.
Right? We're missing out on something. It's okay if you go for something, you have some challenges and you don't reach it. But my God, please reach it. And I will say, coming out of school, again, we were so concerned with our own bag. We weren't really thinking about the community. And we weren't team like Black people or people of color. We were team finance and marketing and pre-med. We're going by our discipline. But we've gotten older and we're like, community is where we need to focus.
Yeah.
Community is where we need to focus. And so a lot of my focus, on youth and making sure people get to their vision is, once you lock in on your contribution, the next thing you need to lock in on is the community where you want to contribute. And I feel like once you get those things in order, there's like a purpose fulfillment. Yeah. Like you're locked into your place. So, I check y'all out online and whatnot. I see what you're doing to see. I see a fitness thing. I'm watching, in the world. I see what's going on. And I see, okay, this is a creative space. This is an opportunity. And it's an opportunity to bring together not only Pan-African professionals, but just young professionals in the city who are experiencing the same things, but also knowing there's something great about this, this niche. Like this, there are things to celebrate here. There are things to exchange here. There's shared experiences that I think can be shared. And, I laugh about like, one Joel off. They still have the rice wars, right? I have gotten into so many rice war conversations, and people don't expect it of me. Like they look at me and they're like, "What you know?" I know things.
Right.
The fact that now is entering the mainstream consciousness. That you have like a jollof rice in the New York Times, and we're like, no. Stop. Just stop. don't do that. These are things that are always present. I'm almost 25 years out of school. It's not new. These aren't new cultural expressions. They weren't centered.
Yeah.
And I feel like right now we are centering global citizenry. We're centering global cultures because people are looking to invest capital in those spaces.
Yeah.
Right. They're looking to express capital in those spaces. And you asked me about the Super Bowl. There's this wonderful moment when you're looking at the Super Bowl and you're like, oh my God, it's so great. They're doing hip hop and not these like old groups. You take a moment and you're like, am I old? Am I old? I might be old. And then you realize, Dr. Dre's been out 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
I might be old. And so I feel like we're leaving the United States and we're looking to the world for our culture change. And navigating that is going to require persons like yourselves, to keep us authentic and to keep us like real. But also, I hate to bring it back to this, never be naive about the real challenges. People are still biased.
Yeah.
People still block. Right. And when you have that block, don't assume that it's a lack on your part. Like, let's take a look and go, all right, this checked off, this checked off, this checked off. Why wasn't this opportunity extended to you? All right, we're going to pivot.
Yeah.
That's the assessment part that I was talking about. You still got to assess. You still got to go back and assess. And I feel like as long as I'm at a point where I see people who I'm just like, oh, there's still a little disparity there. And that the disparity isn't around aptitude or skill set. As long as that exists, I have work to do.
Daina, oh man, this has been really great. This has been really great. And before we continue, I just want to say shout out to hip hop because, man, I don't say that just because I'm a hip hop head, but hip hop has had such a tremendous impact on the world, and it's just amazing. And Daina, I know that you teach the course at Penn, the history of people of African descent. Can you talk a little bit about that course and what you guys cover and what it's been like teaching that?
Absolutely. So Chaz Howard, Reverend Dr. Chaz Howard, our Senior Vice President of Social Equity and Community, went to Dr. Brian Peterson 13 years ago and said, you know what, we should do a course on the history of Black people at Penn. We should talk about our Penn first, the history of the development of the different programs. And we should really just take a moment to memorialize like what the journey has been like within the university and outside of it. So I want to say I was at my Maku at the time, and they conducted the first 2 or 3 classes, and I would sit in on the first couple of sessions. I want to say I came on maybe the second year, and I came frequently enough that they offered me a TA position. So the third year I was offered opportunity to TA. And what we do in the course is we look at not only Penn first, so like the first Black students to attend each of the schools, but we look at how the university changed from its founding. And we look at what the university has meant to the city. So students, when they complete the class, they'll come to us and they said, I came in the class to learn about Black people at Penn, but I've learned about the history of the United States. Our university is one of the founding educational institutions and models in the country. And we take it for granted because it's Philly and it feels like a second city to New York. But we were the capital of the colonies at some point. And so when you're talking about the founding of the nation, when you're talking about enslaved peoples and their labor that helped build the nation, you're talking about our school.
Yeah.
You're talking about our city. And we like to frame things in a historically factual fashion so that we're getting a real picture of what it looked like, again, global trade. And unfortunately, sometimes we're talking about the global trade of human beings. That's how we begin our story. And then over the course of several hundred years, we get to the point where, got some alums talking on a podcast, right? We've come a long way, but it helps us contextualize what it looked like to build Penn to what it looks like today in terms of our diverse population. Philadelphia, people consider to be a Black city, but it went through changes. And we talk about those changes. We talk about why those changes occurred. We don't just talk about Black students. We talk about staff. We talk about relationships with the community. We talk about the Black bottom. And I am from West Philadelphia, so it means a lot to me to be in the class and to teach the class and to tell people what these shifts and changes mean to the community. And we challenge the students and we ask them, what is the legacy you want to leave at Penn? I want to be clear that the class is not a story of woe or anything like that. We just like to keep it real. And we like to talk about what inroads we have made despite all our challenges. And they're really remarkable narratives and stories that we share. And then our students come up with solutions to challenges that they see on campus. And some of those solutions have turned into programs. Some of those solutions have turned into historical pieces that have been published. And so it's a remarkable class in that it is one part history class, but another part like workshop. People doing just like a lot of social impact work and figuring out like what Penn should look like to be inclusive and to really acknowledge its history.
Yeah. Something we didn't talk about was your the current role you're in now, the Penn Spectrum, and the shared interest groups as a director. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like being in that role and a bit about what you're doing currently?
Sure. So our alumni body continues to be involved in the university. And so the role that I am in is very similar to the role that I had at MACU, dealing with affinity groups. But now I'm dealing with the entire alumni body as it regards our diverse populations. So I work with alumni of Native descent. I work with alumni of Asian descent, the entire Black diaspora, the Latinidades diaspora, which is redundant, but that's for those who have language. Latinidades means multiple Latin communities, essentially. And it is just a wonderful opportunity for me. And when I think about my path as a student, and just as a person who is interested in having conversations around identity and interested in uplifting identity as a powerful part of our life and our path, this is a great opportunity for me. I have come to love Penn in a very different way than I did as a student. I think when you come to Penn, you're in love with the brand and you're in love with the possibility. And over the years, I have fallen in love with the people. I'm very clear about the history of the university. I know the backs upon whom it was built. But in our current time, I also honor and am very proud to be at an institution that continues to develop and uplift such a diverse group of people across all identities. And Penn Spectrum is named as such for that particular reason. It is in fact a spectrum. We have learned that there are just so many things that go into identity, that this is just one of the places where we try to concentrate on those particularities and how they affect professional paths. And we like to celebrate our cultures. And so that's pretty much what I'll be doing. The shared interest group side isn't necessarily around ethnic identity or geographic or cultural identity. It's literally around shared interest. So people who want to sustain continued regular contact around a particular interest that is a Penn-centric sort of gathering, as opposed to like a national professional organization or something like that. This is specifically for Penn alumni to join. Those are the shared interest groups. And over the years, the department has been called many different things. Multicultural outreach is a name that it held in the past. And that is essentially what the function of the committee is. But I say that Penn Spectrum is so much better of a title to encompass what we're doing, because there are so many subgroups within our global cultures. It's a way for us to acknowledge how global Penn is. And for me, it's the difference between going from sort of a 2D view of our population to a 3D view. That's where I think we are now. And so I think we're really doing a better capture of our alumni lives, our alumni interests, the things that we enjoy corporately that we want to celebrate. And I want to just highlight the Taste of Penn as just being one of those events that we've held in the past where we saw that there is a desire to celebrate multiple cultures at the same time. Mm. There's a willingness, there's something that we all enjoy about it. And I think it's because it's been our collective educational experience. That's what Penn is. It is a place where everything is at the same time. And so Penn Spectrum sort of strives to honor cultures separately, but also make sure we always come together.
Definitely.
Absolutely. And Daina, thank you for sharing with everything with us about, because it sounds to me like Penn is really pushing to really meet the moment. I think that we're in a very interesting time right now in our lives where, like, you know, this idea of share interests and bringing different people, having this global view, it's really what's going on in the world right now. So I'm just really happy. Yeah. Like, Penn couldn't find a better person to really take on this, to take on this new venture and to make sure like Penn continue to really play its global role in the world. So the only thing I wanted to say is I want to say thank you for stepping up into this role. And I know that you would definitely deliver and to continue to play the role it should be. And for me as alumnus, I'm just more excited now to see. So what message do you have for alumni out there, for alumni of color, and how they could continue to be engaged and contribute to what Penn is really trying to do?
I would say, look to your left and look to your right. And those are your assets. Your Penn network is probably one of the most valuable resources that you have never tapped into. And there is often a willingness to collaborate, to build and to grow that we don't explore because we feel, I think, a false notion of competition professionally. And it's like when you say meeting the moment, I think we are in a moment of collaboration. We know that solutions have to be sought through working together and working together across lines that we probably wouldn't have crossed before. So, you know, you two are sitting again at a podcast table, your own studio. Look to your left and your right. Make that Penn call. Out to one another, and know that as an institution, Penn is preeminent in its scholarship, in its research, in its reach. And you should really tap into your network. You should tap into your network across all cultures. And you should know that the alumni base and the alumni relations office here is here to help you when you see those ideas, and is here to help you share that with other people, not just across your professional concerns, but your community concerns, your mental health, your wellness. One of the greatest things about Penn that I think people return to 2 or 3 years out of school is this shared experience where our standard of performance, our standard of engagement, our standard of excellence was the same. And we go out into the world and we realize that that level sets the bar for other people. And you realize like, oh, wait, I am the star that other people were reaching for. Make sure you stick in that community. You know, the way we refer to ourselves as preeminent and consider ourselves global leaders is not a myth. It is factual. Look around the world and see who is sitting where and doing what and how, and you'll find Penn alum there. And you are one of them. So share.
For sharing that with us, Daina. The last question that I have is for your younger self. Like if you could talk to the younger Daina Richie-Troy, maybe when you're just graduating from Penn and you're about to embark on, you know, the next chapter of your life, you're still kind of figuring things out, but you know what you didn't want, you know, sort of knew what you wanted. What advice would you have for her, knowing what you know now, and how she could like navigate, you know, going forward?
I would tell her to be grateful. I would tell her to be grateful. And the reason I say that is when you are standing at a milestone and at a precipice, you're often looking to the next thing. And when you do that, I think you compare and you critique, because I'm talking about preeminence. Preeminence comes from optimizing, right? It comes from seeking the best solution, being the best. And although that is a wonderful goal and a wonderful way to be, to continue to optimize and grow, you have to maintain a mindset of gratefulness so that you can stand on that foundation that who you are is enough, where you are is enough, the time that you're in is enough. And then when your heart opens, an opportunity opens for you to grow and do other things, you have the strength and you have the willingness to do it because you've been grateful for where you are, as opposed to, tearing yourself down or feeling like things are not aligned. They probably are. And I think that if I think about where I am as a professional now, aligning with the moment and not trying to live in a future moment is the best way to be. And I think you do that through being grateful and just being very honest about, what you have on your side in that moment.
Thank you for sharing that.
There's no better way to close it out with that.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's truly been a pleasure having you on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And we're excited to continue the conversation with you too. And after the the little mishap in the last show and everything kind of broke down, we kept talking afterwards, and we're excited just to continue the conversation with you, and we hope that this is kind of like the start.
This is the start,
yeah.
Dana. I just think that we very much align with you on the space that you're in right now. I'm excited to see how we could continue to lean in and because like I said, I love everything that you share with us. I love you think about impact. IKEA we stay in Philly. We're one of the few Penn alumni that's just like, you know what, we ain't gonna get on that New York wagon, or we ain't gonna get on that DC wagon, and none of that, because honestly, we go to Penn for that reason, because these are the spaces that, but we decide to actually stay here because there's something special about Philly that kept us growing here. But also, we saw a lot of opportunity here. This is the place where you can make the most impact. So I'm excited to see or hear or whatever opportunity that you want to send our way, how we could continue to engage with Penn. Yeah,
absolutely.
So
make it a point to not take for granted that the things that you have access to and the things that you think you're in people's feeds or in their faces. We got to circle back. We have to circle back. So I'll make sure that I do that with you and make sure that we promote Pepper Soup, and that Pepper Soup Talk becomes something that I think the students would be interested in, And last night I participated in a pageant at Penn, Penn Gent, which is hosted by Delta Sigma Theta Gamma Chapter. It was their 10-year anniversary.
Wow.
It was their 10-year anniversary, and there were some alum who attended. And I just thought in that moment, do not despise small beginnings. I've watched these women go on to become professionals, building upon the work they did as undergrads, promoting events like this. You think about our events, Calabash and things like that. So engaging with students, it's a wonderful way to build professionals and also your staff, right? So these are people who can come along with you along the way. So I know that people don't often look back to college as a way to build their network because undergrads are living a different life, but they're just you. 5 years to come, right? So I would also offer that as just a perspective that I've developed over the years when I watch people and I go, you really remind me of someone. And it's someone who's, currently a professional, but who's been, a graduate for 15 years. It's a great way. And it's sort of the arc of my network, is just watching people go into these different professions and spaces and develop these skill sets that can come from very simple engagements, very simple engagements.
Man,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Daina. This has been so great. It's been so great.
All right.
Hope you have a good rest of your day.
Yes, you too. Happy weekend to you. Enjoy.